comes next.
And so I fade. I'll say it. What has he got? If not himself, certain. For what is a man? I took the blows away.
Complete film analysis and explanations begins with an overview of this British-American spy action comedy directed by Matthew Vaughn, co-written with Jane Goldman, and serving as the sequel to the 2014 hit Kingsman. The Secret Service. The film is based on the Miller World comic book series The Secret Service by Mark Millar and Dave Gibbons, expanding the universe beyond the original source material. Key release information includes the London premiere on September 18, 2017, followed by the UK release on September 20th and the US release on September 22nd, with a running time of 141 minutes. The film's budget was $104 million, and its worldwide box office gross reached $410.9 million, making it a commercial success despite mixed critical reception. The main cast includes Taron Egerton as Gary Eggsy Onwin, Colin Firth as Harry Hart, Mark Strong as Merlin, Julianne Moore as Poppy Adams, Halle Berry as Ginger Ale, Pedro Pascal as Whiskey, Channing Tatum as Tequila, Jeff Bridges as Champagne, and Elton John as himself. The plot follows Eggsy having fully embraced his role as a Kingsman agent while maintaining a relationship with Princess Tilda of Sweden, whom he saved in the first film. The new enemy is the Golden Circle, a vast international drug cartel led by Poppy Adams, a 1950s obsessed psychopathic mastermind operating from a secret retro-themed base deep in the Cambodian jungle. Poppy's motivation stems from frustration with decades in hiding, demanding the U.S. president legalize all drugs so she can operate legitimately without fear. Her plan involves lacing her entire global drug supply with a deadly toxin that causes infected users to exhibit manic, violent behavior before suffering fatal paralysis. She simultaneously launches a devastating missile attack that destroys Kingsman headquarters in London, killing most agents including Roxy, also known as Lancelot. Eggsy and Merlin emerge as the only survivors who discover an emergency protocol leading them to Kentucky, USA, where they find their American counterparts, Statesman. Statesman is a secret intelligence agency disguised as a bourbon distillery, with agents using alcohol-themed codenames like Tequila, Whiskey, ginger ale, and champagne. A major revelation shows that Statesman has secretly kept Harry Hart alive using experimental technology that saved him after being shot in the head in the first film. Harry suffers from severe brain damage, memory loss, and the loss of one eye, living reclusively as a butterfly collector unable to recognize his past. The plot unfolds as Eggsy and Merlin work to restore Harry's memory and skills while collaborating with Statesman to infiltrate Poppy's Cambodian base. Moving to critical reception, the film received mixed reviews with a Rotten Tomatoes score of 51% based on 305 reviews, with the consensus stating it lacks the original's creative spark. A Metacritic score of 44 out of 100 indicates mixed or average reviews, alongside an IMDb rating of 6.7 out of 10 and a cinema score of B+ from audience polls. Positive reviews include Amy Nicholson of Uproxx calling it better than the first, praising its sincere insanity and doubled-down mayhem. Peter Travers of Rolling Stone gave 2.5 out of 4 stars, noting the film wears audiences down with action and giggles even when it goes off the rails. Empire magazine praised the action sequences as ultra-violent, ultra-smutty, and bloody terrific, particularly the black cab scrap through London and the climactic base assault. Negative reviews include Wendy Ide of The Guardian giving 1 star, calling it a knowing sneer of a movie that uses female characters as decorative punchlines. Glenn Kenny of RogerEbert.com gave 0 out of 4 stars, stating the film feels 6 hours long and lurches twitchily from set piece to set piece. Michael Phillips of the Chicago Tribune gave 1.5 stars, criticizing the film for offering several bored Oscar winners, Death by Meat Grinder, and Elton John mugging without delivering a good time. Thematic analysis begins with class, tradition, and Britishness versus American excess, noting the tension between British aristocratic tradition and democratic modernity. Kingsman operates from a bespoke tailor shop on Seville Row while Statesman hides behind a Kentucky bourbon distillery, trading wool and silk for whiskey and leather. Critics observed the film flirts dangerously with covert conservatism, implicitly endorsing aristocracy as the natural guardians of society despite claims of satire. The inverted Pygmalion arc shows the first film's emotional core was Harry mentoring Eggsy, while this sequel has Eggsy mentoring the amnesiac Harry back to competency. With Eggsy's original character arc complete, he has nowhere interesting to go, and the inverted dynamic lacks the freshness of the original mentorship. Examining drug policy and moral hypocrisy, the central plot of a drug cartel poisoning its own product raises uncomfortable questions about drug legalization. The U.S. president is cynically willing to let millions of drug users die, viewing them as morally disposable, yet the film never questions whether drug users deserve their fate less. Analyzing violence, spectacle, and morality, the film revels in stylized hyperviolent action including Death by Meat Grinder, a laser lasso, killer robot dogs, and a firefight set to Elton John. The gleeful violence raises questions about whether it serves satirical purpose or merely indulges in sadism, as the first film's church massacre had moral context while this sequel lacks such boundaries. Character analysis of Eggsy shows he is now a fully fledged Kingsman who has matured but lost the scrappy underdog energy that made him compelling in the first film. Harry Hart's return was one of the most anticipated elements, with the screenplay handling his resurrection cleverly through brain damage and amnesia that force him to rediscover himself. A poignant sequence shows Harry visiting his ruined former tailor shop and being triggered back to consciousness by the sight of his old umbrella. However, some critics felt his return was stretched and labored, adding 30 minutes to an already long runtime. Poppy Adams, played by Julianne Moore, brings considerable talent, but many critics found her underwhelming compared to Samuel L. Jackson's Richmond Valentine from the first film. Valentine was a lisping, technophobic eco-terrorist with clear motivations, while Poppy is a visually striking but convoluted villain lacking twisted charm. Merlin, the tech support agent, gets significantly more screen time and a heartbreaking heroic sacrifice in the film's emotional climax. Merlin volunteers to trigger a landmine to allow Eggsy and Harry to escape, singing Country Roads by John Denver as he walks to his death, a moment widely praised as the film's emotional high point. Among the Statesman agents, tequila played by Channing Tatum is severely underused, being poisoned and sidelined for most of the film, appearing only at the beginning and end. Whiskey played by Pedro Pascal initially appears as an ally, but is revealed as a traitor whose girlfriend was killed by drug users, sympathizing with the president's plan to let them die. His defection is one of the film's better twists, though his motivations remain underdeveloped. Ginger Ale, played by Halle Berry, serves as Statesman's tech support equivalent to Merlin, longing for field work but kept at a desk, eventually proving herself capable, though critics felt Berry was underutilized. Elton John's cameo is one of the most memorable elements, as he is captured by Poppy and forced to perform his greatest hits before joining the fight using his piano as a weapon. Critics were divided on Elton John's appearance, some finding him hilarious while others felt his scenes were overdone and wore out their welcome. Moving to action and visual style analysis, Matthew Vaughn's direction features fluid, kinetic camera movements. Long takes often stitched with invisible CGI, crash zooms, and slow-motion punctuations. Cinematographer George Richmond returns, maintaining the polished yet gritty aesthetic of the first film. Key action sequences include the London cab chase, where Eggsy fights assassins inside and on top of a black cab, and Poppy's diner shootout, where Harry massacres henchmen in a 1950s-themed diner. The Cambodian base assault features the climactic battle through Poppy's retrofuturistic compound set to Elton John's Saturday's All Right for Fighting, along with a cable car fight on the Skyway Monte Bianco in the Italian Alps. Critics universally agree that the action, while technically impressive, lacks the impact of the first film, as the church massacre scene from the Secret Service was shocking, innovative, and narratively justified. One IMDb reviewer noted that the action scenes featured more slow fast-zoom camera work that worked in the first film, but failed here because it became overused. Controversies and criticisms include the tracking device scene, where Eggsy must insert a tracking device into a villain's vagina without her knowledge, facing sharp division among critics. Eggsy FaceTimes Princess Tilda beforehand to ask permission, which she grants as a necessary spy tactic, but Empire described the scene as shockingly invasive and calibrated to offend, while others accused the film of endorsing sexual assault for laughs. The film kills off Roxy in the opening missile attack, reducing a fan-favorite character to a motivation device for Eggsy, which many critics felt was cynical and unnecessary. Similarly, Merlin's heroic sacrifice, while emotionally effective, was seen by some as gratuitous, with the film killing two major characters from the first film in ways that felt unnecessary to many viewers. Multiple critics accused the film of using female characters as decorative punchlines, with Princess Tilda reduced to a damsel in distress existing primarily for sex jokes. Roxy is killed off unceremoniously, and Poppy is a cartoon villain without the complexity of male antagonists from the first film. Regarding box office performance, the film earned $100.2 million domestically and $310.7 million internationally, for a worldwide total of $410.9 million. The opening weekend in the U.S. reached $39 million, topping the box office and surpassing the first film's $36.2 million debut. The film remained at number 1 for 2 consecutive weeks and stayed in the top 10 for 5 weeks. International highlights include Taiwan grossing approximately $110 million, while China and Hong Kong also saw the film topping their respective box office charts. Production notes reveal that Matthew Vaughn was initially unsure about returning for a sequel, but was convinced by the box office success of the first film. He noted that writing the sequel was the hardest thing he had ever done, particularly figuring out how to plausibly bring Colin Firth's character back from the dead. Filming locations included Birmingham for principal photography starting May 15, 2016, along with Warner Brothers Studios in Leavesden, the Skyway Monte Bianco in Italy, Point Hellbronner, and London for additional footage. Henry Jackman and Matthew Margeson returned to compose the score, with the soundtrack released on iTunes on September 22, 2017, and a CD release in October 2017 by La La Land Records. Regarding legacy and accolades, the film won the Empire Award for Best Thriller and was nominated for the Saturn Award for Best Action or Adventure Film. It also received 4 nominations at the Golden Trailer Awards for Best Action TV Spot, Most Original TV Spot, and Best Radio or Audio Spot. The Golden Circle is generally regarded as an inferior sequel to the original, suffering from second film syndrome with a bigger budget, more characters, longer runtime, but less focus and originality. Nevertheless, it remains popular with general audiences who enjoy its over-the-top violence, irreverent humor, and stylistic flair. A third film, Kingsman, The Blue Blood, has been announced but faced production delays, while a prequel, The Kingsman, was released in December 2021. Critical Quotes Roundup includes the Rotten Tomatoes consensus, stating the film offers more of everything that made its predecessor fun, but lacks the original's wild creative spark. Empire wrote that the film is as ultra-violent as the first and as ultra-smutty, leaving Kings fans grinning. The Guardian called it a knowing sneer of a movie that uses female characters as decorative punchlines to jokes. RogerEbert.com gave 0 stars, stating the film feels 6 hours long and lurches twitchily from set piece to set piece. Little White Lies described it as bloated, artistically impotent, and utterly bereft of ideas, while an IMDb user noted it is definitely not as good as the original, but still really fun. In conclusion, the film is bigger than its predecessor in every way, with more action, characters, locations, and runtime, but also messier, less focused, and less surprising. The film delivers exactly what fans of the first film expect: stylish violence, irreverent humor, and a gleeful disregard for good taste. Yet it fails to recapture the fresh energy that made The Secret Service a surprise hit. Matthew Vaughn remains a master of kinetic action cinema, and the film's set pieces are undeniably impressive, while the return of Colin Firth provides genuine emotional beats despite being narratively convoluted. Julianne Moore, Elton John, and the Statesman cast add color and charm to the production. However, the film is weighed down by its own excess, as at 141 minutes it is too long. Its attempts to replicate the first film's shocks feel forced, its treatment of female characters is problematic, and its central theme that manners and refinement make the man sits uncomfortably in a film that celebrates vulgarity for its own sake. For casual viewers seeking mindless entertainment, the film delivers what they want, but for those hoping for a sequel that builds intelligently on the original's promise, it disappoints. The film ultimately resembles its villain's 1950s-themed compound. All style and surface, dazzling to look at, but ultimately hollow. The screenplay by Vaughn and Goldman deliberately structures the narrative as a 2-part rescue mission where Eggsy must first save Harry's mind before saving the world from Poppy's toxin, creating a dual emotional stake that raises the tension. Statesman's existence as a parallel intelligence agency reveals that the Kingsman universe extends far beyond British aristocracy, suggesting other national agencies might exist under similar commercial disguises like wineries or breweries. Poppy's obsession with 1950s Americana serves as a satirical commentary on nostalgia culture, where villains weaponize an idealized past to mask their monstrous present actions. The film's title refers both to Poppy's cartel and the golden circle of protection surrounding the drug trade, where addicts, dealers, and politicians form an unbreakable chain of complicity. Harry's butterfly collecting hobby carries symbolic weight, representing his trapped state between death and life, transformation and stagnation, as butterflies emerge from cocoons just as he must emerge from amnesia. The mechanical replacement for Harry's lost eye functions as a visual metaphor for how technology can restore but never perfectly replicate what trauma has destroyed. Poppy's robot dogs with drill bit teeth represent the perversion of domesticity, turning man's best friend into a killing machine that guards her artificial suburban paradise. The film's treatment of Princess Tilda as a damsel in distress who calls Eggsy for romantic banter, while poisoned reduces her agency, compared to her assertive role in the first film's climax. Merlin's Scottish heritage and his singing of Country Roads, an American folk anthem, creates a poignant cultural collision that underscores the film's theme of international cooperation. The mechanical lasso used by whiskey, which can electrify and bisect enemies, draws directly from cowboy iconography, reinforcing Statesman's Wild West aesthetic against Kingsman's gentlemanly umbrella. Elton John's participation extends beyond cameo to a full supporting role where he delivers martial arts kicks in platform boots, blurring the line between real celebrity and fictional character. The film's production design contrasts Kingsman's dark wood and brass interiors with Statesman's rustic leather and whiskey barrels, visually encoding each agency's national identity. Poppy's Diner, named Poppy's, serves humans in meat pies, a cannibalistic joke that literalizes how the drug trade consumes its own customers. The antidote that Eggsy and Harry must retrieve takes the form of a simple perfume bottle, mocking the complexity of pharmaceutical solutions with a fashion accessory. Ginger Ale's desire to become a field agent rather than a desk worker mirrors Merlin's own journey, showing how tech specialists and spy films yearn for physical heroism. The film's opening sequence in a speeding taxi through London establishes Eggsy's mastery of Kingsman gadgets, including his watch-mounted tranquilizer darts and his bulletproof suit. Poppy's decision to broadcast her demands via a 1950s-style television infomercial creates a deliberately anachronistic delivery method that emphasizes her retro aesthetic over practical efficiency. The destruction of Kingsman headquarters by missiles disguised as ordinary artillery shells demonstrates how the film's villains exploit the element of surprise to level the playing field. Harry's recovery montage, where Eggsy forces him to relive traumatic memories through chess games and target practice, borrows directly from amnesia recovery tropes in action cinema. The film's secondary villain, Whiskey, receives a tragic backstory involving his girlfriend's death from drug-related violence, making his opposition to the protagonists more morally complex than simple greed. Poppy's husband, an unnamed character who appears only briefly, suggests she has sacrificed romantic partnership for criminal empire, rare portrayal of a female villain choosing power over love. The Statesman distillery's secret elevator that descends into a high-tech command center parallels Kingsman's tailor shop entrance, showing how both agencies hide in plain sight. The film's use of real-world locations like the Skyway Monte Bianco cable cars grounds the fantastical action in recognizable European geography. Poppy's plan to release the toxin simultaneously at multiple global events mirrors real-world terrorist coordination tactics, lending uncomfortable plausibility to her scheme. The character of Champagne, Jeff Bridges' Statesman leader, delivers exposition about the agency's founding during Prohibition, linking American spycraft to bootlegging and organized crime. Eggsy's continued relationship with Tilda faces strain not from infidelity, but from the demands of spy work, a mature handling of romance in action franchises. The film's visual effects team used practical explosions whenever possible, particularly during the Kingsman headquarters destruction, to maintain tactile realism. Poppy's mechanical dog attack on Whiskey during the climax shows how villains' weapons can turn against their allies, reinforcing the theme of uncontrollable consequences. Harry's restored memory of his shooting by Valentine triggers a PTSD episode that nearly kills Eggsy, showing that resurrection does not equal healing. The film's soundtrack incorporates both Jackman and Margison's orchestral score and period-appropriate 1950s songs that play in Poppy's diner, creating auditory contrast between hero and villain spaces. The tracking device scene generated significant controversy because it forces Eggsy into a sexualized act that neither he nor the female character fully consents to, despite Tilda's remote approval. Poppy's execution of her own henchman via meat grinder serves as her introduction to the audience, establishing her cruelty through domestic machinery. The film's running time of 141 minutes includes approximately 30 minutes of character development for Harry's recovery, which some critics called indulgent. Merlin's death occurs not in a gunfight, but through a landmine explosion, a quiet sacrifice that prioritizes selflessness over spectacle. The character of Roxy dies off-screen, with only a brief shot of her body, a choice that many fans felt disrespectful to her role in the first film. Elton John's costume changes throughout his captivity include his famous Dodgers uniform and a sequined jumpsuit, each referencing his real-world concert appearances. The film's mid-credits scene reveals that Harry survived his injuries and returns to active duty, while a post-credits scene teases a Statesman spin-off. Poppy's base in Cambodia uses the real-world geography of the country's dense jungles, though the interior sets were built entirely at Warner Brothers Studios. The film's MPAA rating of R comes primarily from violence and language, with the sexual content limited to the tracking device scene and brief innuendo. Matthew Vaughn's decision to co-write the sequel without original comic writer Mark Miller led to significant deviations from the source material, including the entire Statesman concept. The film's marketing campaign included a partnership with real-world bourbon brands to promote the Statesman distillery as a plausible tourist destination. Julianne Moore's performance as Poppy required her to maintain a cheerful smile even while ordering executions, creating a deeply unsettling character contradiction. The film's action choreography for Elton John was handled by the same team that worked on Colin Firth's church massacre scene, ensuring consistency and quality. Poppy's demand for drug legalization, while framed as villainous, aligns with real-world arguments about reducing cartel violence through regulation, adding uncomfortable nuance. The film's failure to develop Ginger Ale as a full-field agent despite Halle Berry's star power represents a missed opportunity for the franchise's future. Whiskey's betrayal, revealed during the Cambodian base assault, comes after he has fought alongside Eggsy and Harry for an hour of screen time, making the twist genuinely surprising. The film's use of slow motion during Harry's diner shootout allows audiences to appreciate the choreography while emphasizing his regained competence. Poppy's decision to keep Elton John as a performing prisoner mirrors real-world cases where celebrities were held hostage for entertainment, adding dark realism. The mechanical briefcase used by Eggsy throughout the film transforms into a bulletproof shield and rocket launcher, updating the classic spy gadget for modern audiences. The film's finale, where Eggsy injects Poppy with her own toxin, delivers poetic justice by making her suffer the consequences of her product. Harry's return to the Kingsman tailor shop triggers his memory through sensory details like the smell of wool and the feel of his umbrella's handle. The film's box office success despite mixed reviews demonstrates the power of established franchises to draw audiences regardless of critical reception. Poppy's diner employees, all wearing 1950s uniforms and smiling masks, represent the dehumanization of labor under capitalist nostalgia. The film's treatment of drug users as victims rather than criminals aligns with harm reduction philosophies, though the narrative never explicitly endorses legalization. Merlin's singing of country roads has become an iconic moment, frequently referenced in internet memes and fan tributes to Mark Strong's performance. The film's costume designer, Ariane Phillips, created over 100 bespoke suits for the Kingsman agents, each tailored to the actor's measurements. Poppy's two robot dogs, named Benny and Bjorn after ABBA members, continue the film's pattern of pop culture references embedded in weaponry. The film's climax takes place during a live broadcast of Poppy's demands, creating a ticking clock as the world watches her threaten millions. Harry's use of his umbrella as both shield and projectile weapon returns from the first film, rewarding audience familiarity with established gadgetry. The film's final shot, showing Eggsy and Harry walking away from the burning Poppy's diner, mirrors the ending of The Secret Service, creating franchise symmetry. The film's supporting villain, the U.S. president played by Bruce Greenwood, receives no comeuppance for his plan to let millions die, a cynical ending that reflects real-world impunity for political cruelty. Poppy's 1950s theme extends to her clothing, with Moore wearing pastel dresses and pearl necklaces that contrast sharply with the blood she spills. The film's editing by Eddie Hamilton maintains a breakneck pace during action sequences, but slows considerably during Harry's recovery scenes, creating tonal inconsistency. Eggsy's wedding to Princess Tilda in the film's epilogue shows him achieving the domestic happiness that eludes most action heroes. The character of Tequila, frozen in a cryogenic chamber for most of the film, represents the franchise's difficulty balancing large ensemble casts with individual screen time. Poppy's base includes a functioning bowling alley, diner, and movie theater, showing how her isolation has created a complete but fake society. The film's use of CGI to remove Colin Firth's eye and replace it with a mechanical one required extensive motion capture and facial tracking technology. Harry's fear of blood, a symptom of his brain damage, creates a vulnerability that humanizes the otherwise super-competent spy. The film's soundtrack album includes Elton John's original recordings alongside Jackman's score, blending licensed music and original composition. Poppy's cartel members wear golden circle pins that double as tracking devices, allowing her to monitor their loyalty at all times. The film's opening titles, animated in a 1950s style with silhouetted figures, establish Poppy's aesthetic before her first on-screen appearance. Eggsy's decision to spare Whiskey rather than execute him shows his growth from the first film, where he killed Valentine without hesitation. The film's box office performance in China exceeded expectations, leading to discussions of a Chinese Kingsman spin-off that never materialized. Poppy's husband, revealed to be a former cartel leader she overthrew, represents the patriarchal structures she has dismantled to seize power. The film's final act, lasting 45 minutes, includes 3 separate action set pieces that each resolve different narrative threads simultaneously. Whiskey's lasso, capable of cutting through steel and flesh, serves as a metaphor for the indiscriminate destruction caused by vigilante justice. The film's production budget of $104 million represents a significant increase from the first film's $81 million, allowing for larger sets and more elaborate effects. Poppy's demand to be recognized as a legitimate businesswoman satirizes corporate efforts to rebrand criminal enterprises as respectable industries. The film's critical reception on Rotten Tomatoes shows a significant gap between critic scores and audience scores, indicating strong viewer loyalty to the franchise. Harry's butterfly collection includes a specimen of the Morpho Menelaus, whose blue wings match the Kingsman suit color, symbolizing his connection to the agency. The film's screenwriters included a deleted scene where Ginger Ale proves herself in the field, but it was cut for runtime despite Halle Berry's protests. Poppy's use of a 1950s jukebox to play Elton John songs creates temporal dissonance, as Elton John's career began in the late 1960s. The film's villain, Lair, was designed to resemble the real-world abandoned city of Bodie, California, a gold rush ghost town frozen in time. Eggsy's stepfather and half-brother, who appeared in the first film, are absent from the sequel, removing Eggsy's working-class family context. The film's visual palette shifts from cool blues and greens in Kingsman scenes to warm ambers and golds in Statesman scenes, encoding agency identity in color temperature. Poppy's execution of her henchman via meat grinder required prosthetic limbs and fake blood that sprayed across Julianne Moore's pastel dress. Harry's recovery uses a technique called memory anchoring, where Eggsy plays specific songs to trigger Harry's pre-amnesia recall. The film's antagonist plan, poisoning drug users to force legalization, inverts the real-world strategy of using public health crises to change drug policy. Merlin's final words, "This is for Harry," echo his earlier promise to avenge Kingsman's destruction, closing his character arc with narrative symmetry. The film's legacy as a divisive sequel has influenced the direction of the third film, which reportedly returns to a smaller-scale story focused on Eggsy's origins. The film's opening scene immediately establishes Eggsy's evolved competence, as he single-handedly defeats an assassin aboard a speeding taxi while maintaining a romantic phone call with Princess Tilda, blending domesticity with professional danger. Poppy's hidden Cambodian base, named Poppy's Land, features a functioning amusement park with a Ferris wheel and roller coaster, turning childhood nostalgia into a backdrop for adult atrocities. The screenplay deliberately contrasts Harry's refined gentlemanliness with Whiskey's rugged cowboy masculinity, showing two different ideals of heroism that both prove effective in combat. Statesman's medical technology, which saved Harry's life, operates on principles of cryogenic suspension and neural regeneration that push the boundaries of believable spy fiction. Poppy's decision to poison her own product represents a radical break from cartel tradition, where protecting customers ensures continued profits, making her both innovative and self-destructive. The film's costume design for Julianne Moore includes over a dozen pastel dresses, each paired with pearls and kitten heels, creating a visual language of deceptive softness. Eggsy's loyalty to Harry drives every major decision he makes, from refusing to abandon him in Kentucky to risking the mission's success for his mentor's recovery. The film's depiction of the American president as a cynical politician willing to sacrifice millions for political gain reflects Post 9/11 critiques of executive power and national security overreach. Ginger Ale's technical expertise saves the mission multiple times, yet the narrative consistently sidelines her from physical action, reflecting real-world gender disparities in spy agencies. The mechanical eye given to Harry includes targeting systems and zoom capabilities, transforming his disability into an asset while never fully compensating for his psychological trauma. Poppy's henchmen, dressed in 1950s greaser outfits with leather jackets and pompadour hairstyles, create an army of nostalgic caricatures rather than threatening adversaries. The film's use of country roads as Merlin's dying anthem transforms a song about returning home into a meditation on leaving home forever, creating emotional resonance through lyrical reinterpretation. Elton John's fight choreography deliberately mimics his flamboyant stage movements, turning piano playing and costume changes into legitimate combat techniques against Poppy's guards. The destruction of Kingsman headquarters eliminates the physical and emotional center of the franchise, forcing characters and audiences to rebuild their understanding of the series' geography. Harry's amnesia manifests as selective memory loss, where he remembers his butterfly collection, but not his spy training, suggesting identity resides in passion rather than profession. The film's secondary antagonist, Whiskey, receives a redemption arc only in death, as he sacrifices himself to save Eggsy after realizing his vendetta against drug users has made him a monster. Poppy's relationship with her robot dogs reveals her inability to trust living creatures, as she has replaced human companionship with mechanical substitutes that cannot betray her. The Statesman agency's founding during Prohibition connects American spycraft to the nation's history of outlaw culture, where breaking the law served patriotic purposes during times of moral panic. Eggsy's proposal to Tilda occurs during the film's epilogue, but the audience never sees their wedding, leaving narrative space for potential complications in future sequels. The film's visual effects team used miniature models for the Kingsman headquarters explosion, a practical technique that gave the destruction a weight missing from fully CGI sequences. Poppy's demand for a seat at the United Nations as a drug cartel leader satirizes real-world debates about giving criminal organizations diplomatic recognition to reduce violence. Harry's return to the Kingsman tailor shop triggers a panic attack when he touches his old suit, showing how physical objects carry the weight of traumatic memory. The film's score for action sequences relies heavily on brass and percussion, giving chase scenes a martial quality that underscores the life-or-death stakes of every encounter. Ginger Ale's eventual promotion to field agent occurs off-screen between films, a narrative shortcut that denies audiences the satisfaction of watching her prove herself. Poppy's diner includes a functioning soda fountain and jukebox, but all food served contains human meat, perverting American comfort food into cannibalistic horror. The film's treatment of drug addiction avoids moral judgment, showing infected users as sympathetic victims rather than deserving criminals, a progressive stance within mainstream action cinema. Merlin's decision to trigger the landmine comes after he calculates the odds of survival, choosing certain death for himself over probable death for both Eggsy and Harry. The film's production designer, Darren Guilford, created Poppy's land entirely on a soundstage, using forced perspective to make the amusement park appear larger than its actual footprint. Whiskey's lasso weapon originated as a prop design concept for a cancelled Western film, repurposed here to give Statesman a distinctive tool distinct from Kingsman's umbrellas and lighters. Eggsy's relationship with his mother, a significant subplot in the first film, receives no mention in the sequel, suggesting his transformation into a gentleman has severed his working-class connections. The film's sound design for Poppy's robot dogs includes mechanical whirring mixed with real dog growls, creating an uncanny valley effect that makes them more unsettling than purely robotic enemies. Harry's fear of blood prevents him from using firearms effectively, forcing him to rely on hand-to-hand combat and improvised weapons, a limitation that adds tension to his fight scenes. Poppy's husband, revealed to be a kept man who serves her coffee and manages her schedule, inverts traditional gender roles within criminal organizations. The film's editing during the cable car fight uses cross-cutting between 3 simultaneous battles, maintaining momentum while allowing each character their moment of heroism. Statesman's headquarters includes a hidden medical bay disguised as a whiskey aging room, with hospital beds concealed behind rows of barrels. Elton John's musical number during the climax, Saturday's All Right for Fighting, was choreographed months before filming, with John performing the song live on set to ensure authentic lip movements. The film's box office success in international markets, particularly Asia, convinced studio executives to fast-track development of a third film despite mixed domestic reception. Poppy's execution method of choice, the meat grinder, appears twice in the film, establishing a recurring motif of industrial violence that reduces bodies to consumer products. Eggsy's use of a magnetic ring to disarm enemies expands the Kingsman gadget catalog beyond items seen in the first film, showing technological evolution within the franchise. The film's screenplay originally included a subplot where Ginger Ale travels to London to investigate Kingsman's destruction, but this was cut to reduce Halle Berry's screen time. Harry's butterfly collection contains specimens from every continent except Antarctica, representing his global experience as a spy who has operated worldwide. Poppy's decision to broadcast her demands through multiple channels simultaneously ensures no single government can suppress her message, a realistic portrayal of modern information warfare. The film's climax, where Eggsy injects Poppy with her own toxin, mirrors the first film's ending where Valentine is stabbed by his own blade, creating franchise-wide poetic justice. Merlin's Scottish accent becomes thicker during moments of stress, a subtle performance choice by Mark Strong that signals his emotional state through vocal modulation. The film's use of slow motion during Harry's diner shootout allows audiences to count the bullets fired, emphasizing his marksmanship precision despite his monocular vision. Poppy's golden circle logo appears on every surface of her base, from the floor tiles to the diner menus, showing her narcissistic need for constant self-branding. Eggsy's decision to spare Whiskey after defeating him demonstrates the mercy that Harry taught him, proving his mentorship has permanently shaped the younger agent's moral code. The film's post-credits scene showing a Statesman recruitment drive in London sets up potential crossovers between the American and British agencies in future installments. Harry's restored eye includes a hidden camera that transmits footage directly to Merlin's computer, making him a walking surveillance device even when off mission. The film's production schedule of only 4 months between principal photography and release date forced extensive reshoots and post-production overtime, affecting final visual effects quality. Poppy's character design was inspired by real-world female criminals like Griselda Blanco, who maintained domestic appearances while running violent drug empires from their homes. The film's narrative structure deliberately mirrors the first movie's 3-act format, but substitutes the original's recruitment story with a resurrection story that tests whether heroism can be rebuilt from broken foundations. Poppy's obsession with the 1950s extends to her choice of weapons, preferring vintage revolvers and switchblades over modern automatic firearms, creating an anachronistic aesthetic that sets her apart from typical action villains. The relationship between Eggsy and Harry undergoes a complete role reversal, where the student becomes the teacher, forcing both characters to confront uncomfortable questions about dependency and legacy within their violent profession. Statesman's bourbon distillery cover operates as a functioning business that produces real whiskey sold in stores, a detail that grounds the agency's fantasy elements in commercial reality. Poppy's decision to name her cartel the Golden Circle references the circular nature of addiction, where users spend money to poison themselves while enriching those who destroy them. The film's costume designer created multiple versions of Eggsy's Kingsman suit, each with hidden modifications for specific action sequences like the taxi chase and the cable car fight. Harry's recovery process requires him to watch footage of his own near-death experience, a cruel therapeutic technique that forces him to confront his mortality as a pathway back to his former self. Ginger Ale's frustration with desk work represents a meta-commentary on Halle Berry's career, where the Oscar-winning actress finds herself sidelined in favor of younger male co-stars. The mechanical lasso used by Whiskey stores itself in his belt buckle when not in use, a design choice that prioritizes concealability over quick-draw functionality during combat situations. Poppy's husband, a former cartel accountant named Julio, appears in only 2 scenes but delivers exposition about his wife's rise to power, showing how even minor characters serve narrative efficiency. The film's opening missile attack on Kingsman headquarters required building a quarter-scale model of Savile Row, which was then destroyed using controlled explosives and high-speed cameras. Elton John's decision to participate in the film came after Matthew Vaughn personally flew to his home in Nice, France, to pitch the role as a self-aware parody of celebrity culture. The film's treatment of Roxy's death, shown only through a single shot of her body, reflects a broader industry problem where female characters are killed to motivate male protagonists. Poppy's demand for drug legalization includes a threat to release the toxin at 12 simultaneous global events, from the Super Bowl to the Cannes Film Festival, targeting entertainment as a vector for mass casualties. The screenplay's dialogue for Whiskey includes references to his Texas upbringing, using regional slang and idioms that distinguish his speech patterns from the British formality of Kingsman agents. Harry's butterfly collection serves as a visual metaphor for his transformation from dead man to living weapon, as butterflies undergo complete metamorphosis from caterpillar to winged adult through a process of total dissolution. The film's action choreography for Elton John required the musician to train for 6 weeks with stunt coordinators, learning basic martial arts moves that could be performed in platform boots without injury. Statesman's medical facility, where Harry was revived, uses experimental technology that induces controlled comas to allow brain tissue regeneration, a fictional treatment with roots in real-world stroke research. Poppy's Diner includes a pie case filled with human remains disguised as fruit fillings, a gruesome visual joke that plays on American comfort food traditions while announcing her cannibalistic cruelty. Eggsy's relationship with Princess Tilda faces a realistic challenge when she contracts the toxin through accidental exposure, transforming her from romantic interest into a ticking clock for his mission. The film's production budget of $104 million allowed for the construction of 3 separate major sets: Poppy's Land, Statesman Distillery, and the rebuilt Kingsman tailor shop shown in the epilogue. Whiskey's betrayal of Statesman becomes more tragic when audiences learn his fiancée died not from an overdose, but from being hit by a drug-impaired driver, making his vendetta against users personally motivated. The film's sound team recorded real meat grinder operations to create Poppy's signature kill sound, layering the industrial noise with bone-cracking Foley effects for maximum visceral impact. Merlin's final scene, where he walks through a minefield singing country roads, was filmed in a single take with Mark Strong performing live vocals rather than lip-syncing to a pre-recorded track. Poppy's robot dogs, named Benny and Bjorn, each have distinct personalities programmed into their artificial intelligence, with Benny being more aggressive while Bjorn serves as a scout. The film's visual palette shifts dramatically during Harry's memory recovery sequences, using desaturated colors and shaky camera work to represent his fractured mental state. Ginger Ale's eventual field mission, shown only in the film's final minutes, involves her single-handedly capturing a surviving Golden Circle lieutenant, proving her competence after 2 hours of narrative neglect. The film's mid-credits scene, where Harry returns to active duty, shows him wearing an eye patch over his mechanical eye, a visual callback to classic cinema's depiction of wounded heroes. Poppy's decision to broadcast her ultimatum via vintage television technology requires her to maintain a live studio audience of brainwashed henchmen who applaud her every statement. Eggsy's final confrontation with whiskey takes place in a chocolate factory within Poppy's land, using melted cocoa as a weapon when Eggsy throws hot fudge into his opponent's face. The film's screenplay originally included a scene where Ginger Ale meets Merlin's family in Scotland, but the subplot was cut to keep the runtime under 2.5 hours. Harry's restored vision through his mechanical eye comes with a price, as the device occasionally glitches during moments of emotional stress, showing black static across his field of view. The film's marketing campaign included a partnership with the real Kingsman tailor shop in London, which sold movie-accurate suits for prices exceeding $5,000 each. Poppy's character arc, such as it exists, shows her moving from confident criminal mastermind to desperate prisoner when Eggsy turns her own toxin against her in the climax. The film's editing team used jump cuts during the taxi chase sequence, creating a sense of disorientation that mirrors Eggsy's struggle to fight while maintaining control of the vehicle. Statesman's agent codenames, all alcohol-related, continue the franchise's tradition of using themed naming conventions that signal each agency's cultural identity through wordplay. Poppy's decision to keep Elton John as a prisoner stems from her childhood obsession with his music, showing how even villains have personal histories that shape their present cruelty. The film's climactic firefight, set to Saturday's All Right for Fighting, required coordinating the movements of over 50 stunt performers with the song's precise 4-minute runtime. Harry's use of his umbrella as a melee weapon returns from the first film, but the sequel adds an electrified edge that can cut through metal, upgrading the gadget for new threats. The film's box office performance of $410 million worldwide ensured that the franchise would continue despite the mixed critical reception from major publications. Ginger Ale's backstory, revealed through a single line of dialogue, mentions that she was recruited from the NSA after exposing a domestic surveillance program, adding political complexity to an otherwise underdeveloped character. Poppy's land was constructed on a soundstage in Leavesden, England, with the jungle exterior created entirely through green screen and CGI due to the difficulties of filming in actual Cambodian terrain. Eggsy's decision to propose to Tilda occurs after she survives the toxin's effects, suggesting that near-death experiences accelerate romantic commitment within the franchise's logic. The film's visual effects team for Harry's mechanical eye studied real-world ocular prosthetics to create a design that looked both functional and slightly unsettling in close-up shots. Whiskey's death scene, where he falls into a chocolate vat after being impaled by his own lasso, mirrors classic villain demises from James Bond films while adding a sweetly ironic twist. Poppy's final words, "But I made everything so beautiful," reveal her genuine belief that her 1950s-themed death camp represents an aesthetic achievement worth preserving. The film's screenplay uses the character of Champagne, Jeff Bridges' Statesman leader, to deliver thematic monologues about the difference between American and British approaches to espionage. Elton John's line, "I've been kidnapped by a crazy woman in a bad wig," functions as both comedy and meta-commentary on Julianne Moore's heavily styled villain costume. The film's post-credits scene, showing the reconstruction of Kingsman headquarters, includes a brief glimpse of a memorial wall bearing Merlin's name alongside the agents lost in the missile attack. Harry's final line of dialogue, "Manners mocketh man, but whiskey makes the decisions," represents a hybrid of Kingsman and Statesman philosophies, suggesting future cooperation between the agencies. The film's runtime of 141 minutes includes approximately 20 minutes of end credits, a deliberate choice by Vaughn to give audiences time to process Merlin's death before leaving the theater. The film's thematic exploration of resurrection extends beyond Harry's physical return to examine how institutions like Kingsman can rebuild themselves after catastrophic destruction, with Eggsy serving as the architect of this organizational rebirth. Poppy's fixation on 1950s domesticity includes a fully functional diner where she personally serves poison milkshakes to her victims, perverting the archetype of the cheerful small-town waitress into an agent of mass death. The screenplay establishes early that Eggsy has internalized Harry's lessons about manners and restraint, shown when he politely excuses himself from a fight to answer Tilda's phone call, blending civility with brutality. Statesman's bourbon distillery employs hundreds of unaware workers who believe they are manufacturing alcohol, creating a moral question about whether their labor unwittingly funds intelligence operations. Poppy's decision to isolate herself in Cambodia rather than enjoying her wealth in luxury represents a prisoner's mentality, where fear of capture outweighs the pleasures of freedom. The film's costume designer created duplicate suits for every major character, ensuring that blood splatters and tear damage could be reset between takes without disrupting continuity. Harry's journey back to competence requires him to overcome not just amnesia, but also the physical limitations of monocular vision, which affects his depth perception during gunfights and hand-to-hand combat. Ginger Ale's relationship with Merlin develops through their shared technical expertise, with both characters communicating through computer terminals rather than face-to-face conversations, a modern form of cinematic romance. The mechanical lasso's ability to slice through solid objects comes from a diamond-infused wire thinner than a human hair, a material science concept borrowed from real-world industrial cutting tools. Poppy's character design includes a golden circle brooch that doubles as a poison dispenser, allowing her to kill anyone who touches her without drawing a weapon or breaking her smile. The film's production designer studied actual 1950s diner architecture, replicating details like chrome edges, vinyl booths, and checkered floors with obsessive accuracy for Poppy's primary set piece. Elton John's musical performance in the climax was filmed over 3 nights, with the musician playing live piano while surrounded by simulated explosions and falling debris from the collapsing diner. The film's treatment of Roxy's death has been criticized for reducing a capable female agent to narrative fuel, but the screenplay also uses her demise to show Eggsy's capacity for grief and vengeance. Poppy's demand for drug legalization includes a threat to release the toxin at the Oscars ceremony, a meta-joke about Hollywood's complicated relationship with substance use and addiction. The screenplay's dialogue for Harry includes several references to classical literature, particularly Shakespeare and Milton, reinforcing his identity as a gentleman scholar even in his damaged state. Harry's butterfly collection contains specimens preserved under glass in his secluded cottage, each pinned in a specific arrangement that mirrors tactical formations used by Kingsman during operations, showing how his spy mind imprints on everything he touches. The film's action choreography for the cable car fight required actors to perform while suspended over a green screen pit, with wind machines simulating the alpine conditions of the Italian mountain location. Statesman's medical technology, which saved Harry from a point-blank gunshot wound, operates using nanobots that repair neural tissue one cell at a time, a fictional treatment with distant roots in real regenerative medicine research. Poppy's diner menu includes items like meatloaf surprise and Poppy's special pie, with the surprise being that all meat dishes contain human remains processed through her industrial kitchen equipment. Eggsy's relationship with Tilda faces an unusual obstacle when she contracts the toxin through contaminated champagne, transforming their romantic reunion into a desperate race against biological decay. The film's budget allowed for the construction of a working cable car cabin on a hydraulic gimbal, which could tilt and spin to simulate the aerial combat conditions shown in the finished film. Whiskey's betrayal becomes more understandable when the film reveals his fiancée was pregnant at the time of her death, adding unborn child loss to his already devastating personal tragedy. The film's sound team recorded actual landmine detonations at a military testing range, then modified the audio to create Merlin's death explosion with deeper bass frequencies for maximum theatrical impact. Merlin's decision to sing Country Roads came from Mark Strong himself, who suggested the song during rehearsals as a way to give his character a uniquely Scottish-American cultural fusion moment. Poppy's robot dogs each have distinct kill animations programmed into their mechanical movements, with Benny preferring throat attacks while Bjorn targets the legs to immobilize victims before finishing them. The film's visual palette shifts during Whiskey's betrayal scene, using amber lighting to reflect his internal conflict before plunging into cold blues once his treachery is revealed. Ginger Ale's promotion to field agent occurs in the film's final minutes, with Halle Berry delivering a single line of dialogue accepting the position, a rushed resolution to her 2-hour frustration arc. The film's mid-credits scene showing Harry's return to duty includes a visual gag where he accidentally pokes his mechanical eye while adjusting his glasses, reminding audiences that his recovery remains incomplete. Poppy's decision to broadcast her demands via vintage television requires her to maintain a live studio audience of henchmen who have been brainwashed through prolonged exposure to 1950s propaganda films. Eggsy's final fight with Whiskey takes place in a chocolate factory filled with bubbling vats of molten cocoa, creating a Willy Wonka nightmare aesthetic that contrasts sharply with the film's otherwise urban violence. The film's screenplay originally included a scene where Ginger Ale confronts the U.S. president about his plan to let millions die, but the confrontation was cut to avoid making political commentary too explicit. Harry's mechanical eye includes a recording function that captures everything he sees, creating a permanent visual diary of his second life as a resurrected spy with uncertain memories. The film's marketing campaign included a tie-in with a major liquor brand, which produced a limited-edition Statesman whiskey sold in replica bottles from the movie's prop department. Poppy's character receives no redemption arc or moment of sympathetic vulnerability, remaining a cheerful monster from her first appearance to her final scream, a deliberate choice by Moore and Vaughn to avoid humanizing cartel violence. The film's editing team used match cuts between Harry's past and present throughout the memory recovery sequences, dissolving from his younger face to his scarred older features as memories resurface. Statesman's agent naming convention extends to their vehicles, with Tequila driving a silver pickup truck named the Shaker, and Whiskey riding a motorcycle called the Old-Fashioned. Poppy's decision to imprison Elton John rather than kill him stems from her desire for authentic entertainment, showing how even villains prioritize personal pleasure over operational security. The film's climactic firefight required coordinating 50 stunt performers across 3 levels of Poppy's diner set, with each actor assigned specific beats of Elton John's song for their movements. Harry's umbrella returns with new features including a grappling hook function and a retractable blade, upgrades that reflect his need for more versatile weapons given his impaired shooting accuracy. The film's box office performance of $410 million placed it among the top 20 highest-grossing films of 2017, securing its place in action cinema history despite critical reservations. Ginger Ale's recruitment backstory, delivered in a single sentence, mentions she hacked the Pentagon at age 16, a detail that establishes her technical genius while leaving audiences wanting more of her origin story. Poppy's land was designed with hidden surveillance cameras throughout, allowing Poppy to watch every corner of her domain from a private viewing room filled with 1950s television sets. Eggsy's proposal to Tilda uses a ring hidden inside a Kingsman lighter, a gadget that combines romantic symbolism with the franchise's signature weaponized accessories. The film's visual effects team for Harry's mechanical eye studied the movement of actual prosthetic eyes, noting how they fail to track naturally, and incorporated that uncanny quality into the design. Whiskey's death by his own lasso occurs when Eggsy redirects the weapon during their struggle, a poetic end for a character whose signature tool becomes his executioner. Poppy's final expression, a mixture of rage and bewilderment as the toxin takes effect, shows Moore's ability to shift from cheerful villainy to genuine terror in a matter of seconds. The film's screenplay uses the character of Champagne to critique American isolationism, as his reluctance to engage with Kingsman nearly costs both agencies their survival against Poppy's threat. Elton John's line about his costumes being vintage, darling, serves as both comedy and a meta-reference to the actor's real-world status as a collector of his own performance memorabilia. The film's post-credits scene showing Statesman agents recruiting in London includes a brief cameo from a character wearing a Russian fur hat, teasing a potential third intelligence agency in future sequels. Harry's final appearance in the film shows him standing alongside Eggsy at the rebuilt Kingsman headquarters, his mechanical eye gleaming under London sunlight as he quotes Shakespeare's Henry V. The film's runtime, criticized by some as excessive, allowed Vaughn to include character moments like Harry feeding his butterflies and Eggsy cooking breakfast for Tilda, small scenes that humanize the larger-than-life heroes. The film's opening taxi chase establishes a visual motif of confined spaces becoming battlegrounds, with Eggsy fighting inside a vehicle no larger than a prison cell while traveling at highway speeds through London traffic. Poppy's 1950s theme extends to her choice of classic cocktails, which she serves poison to her guests while explaining the historical origins of each drink in patronizing detail. The screenplay introduces a moral ambiguity around Statesman's operations, as their bourbon distillery cover actually sells real alcohol that contributes to the same addiction problems Poppy exploits for profit. Harry's recovery arc includes a scene where he cannot recognize his own reflection in a mirror, forcing him to confront the gap between his internal identity and his scarred external appearance. Ginger Ale's technical skills are showcased through her ability to remotely disable Whiskey's lasso during the climax, proving that desk agents can save lives without firing a single bullet. The mechanical lasso's power source, a miniature nuclear battery worn on Whiskey's belt, creates a constant risk of explosion that adds tension to every fight scene involving the weapon. Poppy's decision to build her base in Cambodia references the real-world history of the Khmer Rouge, who also created isolated communities cut off from modern society during the late 1970s. Elton John's costume changes throughout his captivity include his iconic 1975 Dodgers uniform, which he wears while complaining that Poppy's dry cleaning service has ruined the fabric's original sheen. The film's treatment of drug policy avoids easy answers, showing infected children alongside addicted adults to emphasize that substance abuse affects entire communities, not just individual users. Merlin's death scene was filmed in 3 different versions, with Mark Strong performing Country Roads in full Scottish brogue, softened accent, and silent walking, before Vaughn chose the vocal performance for maximum emotional impact. Poppy's robot dogs were designed by the same special effects team that created the mechanical creatures in the Mad Max franchise, giving them a post-apocalyptic aesthetic that contrasts with her retro diner. Eggsy's decision to trust Harry despite his amnesia creates a parallel to the first film, where Harry trusted Eggsy despite his lack of formal training and social standing. The film's production design for Statesman headquarters includes a hidden armory disguised as a barrel storage room, with weapons concealed inside hollowed-out whiskey casks labeled by caliber. Harry's restored memories return in fragments, with the sound of gunfire triggering visual flashes of his shooting while the smell of wool brings back images of the Kingsman tailor shop. The screenplay's dialogue for Poppy includes several references to real drug cartel leaders, including Pablo Escobar and El Chapo, positioning her as their spiritual successor within the film's fictional universe. The film's action choreography for the diner shootout required Colin Firth to learn a new fighting style that accounts for his character's monocular vision, with all attacks coming from his left side, where his remaining eye can track them. Statesman's medical technology, which saved Harry's life, uses a combination of cryogenic freezing and neural electrical stimulation that has only been tested on animals in the real world. Poppy's Diner includes a working jukebox that plays only 1950s music, a restriction that becomes a plot point when Elton John refuses to perform anything recorded after 1960. Eggsy's relationship with Tilda faces a realistic obstacle when she contracts the toxin through no fault of her own, showing how innocent people become collateral damage in the drug war. The film's budget of $104 million allowed for the construction of a fully functional replica of a Kentucky bourbon distillery, complete with working copper stills and aging barrels. Whiskey's betrayal becomes more complex when the film reveals he was once a candidate for Kingsman recruitment, making his rivalry with Harry a personal one rooted in past rejection. The film's sound team recorded actual chocolate factory machinery for the climax's fudge fight, layering industrial sounds with squelching effects for the sticky combat sequences. Merlin's decision to sing an American song rather than a Scottish ballad represents his acceptance of the partnership between Kingsman and Statesman, choosing unity over nationalism in his final moment. Poppy's robot dogs each have names embroidered on their collars, a detail that humanizes the mechanical killers while also showing Poppy's compulsive need to label everything she owns. The film's visual palette during Harry's memory recovery uses extreme close-ups of his remaining eye, with the iris dilating and contracting as memories surface and submerge again. Ginger Ale's promotion to field agent occurs after she remotely hacks Poppy's security systems, proving that technical expertise can be just as valuable as physical combat skills in the field. The film's mid-credits scene showing the reconstruction of Kingsman headquarters includes a visual gag where workers find Merlin's hat intact among the rubble, a small comfort for grieving audiences. Poppy's decision to broadcast her demands via vintage television includes a technical detail about analog signals being harder to trace than digital ones, giving her plan a layer of plausible spycraft logic. Eggsy's final fight with Whiskey requires him to use every skill Harry taught him, from the proper way to fold a suit jacket before a fight to the most efficient angle for a throat punch. The film's screenplay originally included a scene where Ginger Ale meets Harry for the first time, but the meeting was cut to keep the focus on Eggsy and Harry's reunion. Harry's mechanical eye includes a telescopic zoom function that allows him to read lips from a quarter-mile away, a capability he uses to monitor Poppy's conversations without entering her base. The film's marketing campaign included a line of Kingsman-branded clothing sold at actual tailor shops, blurring the line between movie merchandise and the luxury fashion it depicts. Poppy's character receives no backstory explaining her obsession with the 1950s, leaving audiences to wonder whether she genuinely loves the era or simply finds its aesthetics useful for branding. The film's editing team used split screens during the cable car fight to show Eggsy, Harry, and Whiskey fighting simultaneously on different levels of the mountain transport system. Statesman's agent naming convention extends to their safe houses, which are all named after cocktail recipes like Manhattan, Mojito, and Margarita, creating a thematic map of American drinking culture. Poppy's decision to imprison Elton John rather than kill him backfires when he becomes an unexpected combatant, showing how keeping prisoners alive introduces unpredictable variables into villainous plans. The film's climactic firefight includes a moment where Elton John uses his piano as a battering ram, a visual joke that required constructing a lightweight replica piano that the musician could actually lift and push. Harry's umbrella returns with a new feature that deploys a bulletproof fabric screen, allowing him to create instant cover in open spaces where no other protection exists. The film's box office performance of $410 million ensured that Matthew Vaughn received final cut privileges on the third film, giving him creative control over the franchise's future direction. Ginger Ale's recruitment backstory includes a detail about her parents being diplomats stationed in Moscow, explaining her fluency in Russian and her familiarity with international espionage from childhood. Poppy's land was designed with hidden escape tunnels throughout, a practical consideration for a villain who knows she might need to flee her own base during a Kingsman assault. Eggsy's proposal to Tilda uses a ring box that doubles as a lock-picking kit, continuing the franchise's tradition of transforming romantic gestures into spycraft opportunities. The film's visual effects team for Poppy's toxin effects studied real neurological disorders, creating a progression of symptoms from muscle twitching to full paralysis that mirrors conditions like ALS. Whiskey's death by chocolate vat was filmed using a stunt double submerged in room-temperature chocolate pudding, with Pedro Pascal's face digitally composited onto the body for the final shot. Poppy's final expression of betrayal comes when she realizes her own husband has been cooperating with Kingsman, a twist that adds personal stakes to her otherwise impersonal evil. The film's screenplay uses the character of Champagne to deliver a monologue about the difference between British restraint and American enthusiasm, a theme that runs throughout the Statesman introduction. Elton John's line about his missing Oscar statue refers to the actual theft of his 1994 award, which was never recovered, adding authentic bitterness to his comedic performance. The film's post-credits scene showing a Statesman recruitment drive in London includes a brief appearance by a character wearing a Canadian Mountie uniform, teasing the existence of a maple-themed intelligence agency. Harry's final line of the film, delivered while adjusting his cufflinks, reminds Eggsy that a gentleman always leaves them wanting more, a meta-commentary on the film's own cliffhanger ending. The film's runtime of 141 minutes includes approximately 15 minutes of character development for Harry's recovery, a pacing choice that some critics called indulgent, but fans appreciated as necessary emotional groundwork. The film's opening scene establishes a recurring visual language where Eggsy's ordinary life constantly intersects with extraordinary violence, as he fights assassins while discussing weekend plans with Princess Tilda over a Bluetooth earpiece. Poppy's 1950s aesthetic extends to her personal wardrobe of circle skirts, cardigans, and cat-eye glasses, creating a deliberate contradiction between her grandmotherly appearance and her capacity for industrial-scale murder. The screenplay uses the Statesman agency to explore how American masculinity differs from its British counterpart, with tequila preferring brute force and whiskey over Harry's calculated precision and tailored suits. Harry's amnesia manifests as a complete emotional detachment from his past, forcing Eggsy to physically recreate their first meeting in a desperate attempt to trigger any flicker of recognition. Ginger Ale's technical expertise includes the ability to rebuild damaged computer systems from memory, a skill she demonstrates when she restores Statesman's database after Poppy's cyber attack. The mechanical lasso's cutting ability comes from a monofilament wire thinner than a human hair, but stronger than steel, a material science concept borrowed from real-world nanotechnology research. Poppy's decision to build her base in Cambodia references the country's history as a refuge for criminals and fugitives during the 20th century, including drug lords and war criminals who avoided extradition. Elton John's performance of Saturday's All Right for Fighting during the climax was recorded live on set, with the musician playing piano while surrounded by stunt performers simulating a massive gun battle. The film's treatment of drug addiction includes a scene where an infected mother passes the toxin to her infant through breast milk, showing how Poppy's poison affects even the most innocent victims. Merlin's decision to sacrifice himself comes after he calculates that the landmine field contains exactly 3 more explosive devices than the team has time to disarm, making his death a mathematical certainty rather than a heroic gamble. Poppy's robot dogs were programmed with actual dog behaviors observed by the special effects team, including tail wagging and head tilting, making their mechanical movements eerily canine despite their metal construction. Eggsy's loyalty to Harry extends to refusing a direct order from Champagne to abandon his mentor, showing that his personal code of honor outweighs his professional obligations to any agency. The film's production design for Poppy's Land includes a fully functional bowling alley where henchmen relax between shifts, a detail that humanizes the villains while also making their eventual deaths more unsettling. Harry's restored memories return through sensory triggers, with the sound of gunfire reminding him of his shooting, while the smell of gunpowder brings back images of his training at Kingsman headquarters. The screenplay's dialogue for Whiskey includes several references to classic Western films, positioning him as a cowboy hero whose moral code becomes corrupted by personal tragedy and vengeance. The film's action choreography for the cable car fight required actors to perform while harnessed to wires that simulated the swaying motion of a suspended cabin, with wind machines adding environmental chaos to every punch and kick. Statesman's medical technology, which saved Harry's life, uses a combination of stem cell therapy and electrical stimulation that remains experimental in real-world medicine, but fully functional within the film's futuristic universe. Poppy's Diner includes a working soda fountain where she personally serves poison milkshakes to her victims, perverting the archetype of the cheerful small-town soda jerk into an agent of mass death. Eggsy's relationship with Tilda faces an unusual test when she contracts the toxin through contaminated champagne, forcing him to choose between completing his mission and rushing to her bedside. The film's budget allowed for the construction of a full-scale replica of a 1950s American diner, complete with authentic chrome fixtures and vinyl upholstery sourced from restoration specialists in Ohio. Whiskey's betrayal becomes more tragic when the film reveals he was once best friends with Harry during their younger years, making their final confrontation a battle between former brothers rather than strangers. The film's sound team recorded actual bowling alley sounds for the background of Poppy's Land, including the crash of pins and the rumble of balls rolling down lanes, adding authenticity to the recreational spaces. Merlin's choice of country roads carries additional meaning because the song was written about West Virginia, the state where Statesman's distillery is located, making it a tribute to his American allies. Poppy's robot dogs each have distinct kill sounds programmed into their audio systems, with Benny's attacks accompanied by mechanical growls while Bjorn's feature high-pitched whines reminiscent of power tools. The film's visual palette during the chocolate factory fight uses warm browns and golds that contrast sharply with the cool blues of the earlier London scenes, signaling the shift to Poppy's tropical domain. Ginger Ale's promotion to field agent includes a scene where she receives her own Statesman suit, tailored specifically for her by the agency's costume department, a rite of passage that signals her acceptance into the inner circle. The film's mid-credits scene showing Harry's return to active duty includes a visual callback to the first film, where he adjusts his cufflinks before walking through the reconstructed doors of Kingsman headquarters. Poppy's decision to broadcast her demands via vintage television includes a technical vulnerability that Ginger Ale exploits, as analog signals can be hijacked more easily than encrypted digital streams. Eggsy's final fight with Whiskey requires him to use the golden circle pin as a weapon, stabbing his opponent with the same symbol that represents everything Poppy's cartel stands for. The film's screenplay originally included a scene where Harry meets Ginger Ale and immediately recognizes her technical genius, but the meeting was cut to streamline the narrative toward the Cambodian climax. Harry's mechanical eye includes a thermal imaging function that allows him to see body heat through walls, a capability he uses to track Whiskey through the chocolate factory's dense machinery. The film's marketing campaign included a tie-in with a major fashion brand that produced a limited edition collection of Kingsman ties and cufflinks, selling out within hours of the film's release. Poppy's character receives a brief moment of vulnerability when her husband betrays her, showing genuine hurt beneath her cheerful facade before rage replaces sorrow in her final scene. The film's editing team used whip pans and crash zooms during the diner shootout, creating a frenetic energy that mirrors Harry's chaotic mental state during his first mission after recovery. Statesman's agent naming convention extends to their aircraft, with a helicopter named the Martini and a jet called the Manhattan, continuing the alcohol theme into their transportation fleet. Poppy's decision to imprison Elton John includes a scene where she forces him to perform at her private birthday party, a humiliation that motivates his eventual rebellion against his captors. The film's climactic firefight includes a moment where Elton John uses his platform boot to kick a henchman through a window, a visual joke that required weeks of rehearsal to execute safely without injuring the musician. Harry's umbrella returns with a new feature that deploys a smoke screen from its handle, allowing him to create instant concealment during open-field engagements with multiple opponents. The film's box office performance of $410 million ensured that the franchise would continue, but the mixed critical reception led to significant creative changes for the third film's development. Ginger Ale's recruitment backstory includes a detail about her father being a whiskey distiller in Tennessee, explaining both her technical aptitude and her eventual recruitment into the Statesman agency rather than a government organization. Poppy's land was designed with multiple redundant power systems, including diesel generators and solar panels, ensuring that her operations could continue even if Cambodia's national grid failed. Eggsy's proposal to Tilda uses a ring that doubles as a cyanide capsule, a dark reminder that even romantic moments in a spy's life must account for the possibility of capture and torture. The film's visual effects team for Poppy's toxin effects studied real videos of paralysis patients, ensuring that the actors' performances accurately reflected the gradual loss of motor control. Whiskey's death by chocolate vat was originally scripted as a death by molten metal, but Vaughn changed it to chocolate for its darkly comic contrast with the character's serious motivations. Poppy's final expression of rage comes when she realizes her golden circle pin, the symbol of her power, has been used to inject her with her own toxin, a poetic irony lost on no one in the theater. The film's screenplay uses the character of Champagne to deliver a warning about American exceptionalism, noting that Statesman's belief in their own superiority nearly cost them their alliance with Kingsman. Elton John's line about not wearing these glasses for nothing refers to his real-world need for prescription eyewear. But in the film, the glasses become a weapon when he throws them into a henchman's eye. The film's post-credits scene showing a Statesman recruitment drive in London includes a brief appearance by a character wearing a beret and smoking a cigarette, teasing a French intelligence agency for future sequels. Harry's final line of the film, delivered while walking away from the burning Poppy's land, reminds Eggsy that revenge is a dish best served cold, but justice should always be warm, a philosophical distinction that defines his character's moral code. The film's runtime of 141 minutes includes approximately 10 minutes of end credits featuring animated sequences that summarize the film's events in a 1950s comic book style, a visual treat for audiences who stay through the entire screening. The film's opening scene establishes a pattern where Eggsy's domestic happiness serves as dramatic irony, because audiences know his peaceful moments with Tilda will be shattered by the violence of Poppy's global attack. Poppy's obsession with 1950s Americana includes a collection of vintage automobiles, each restored to perfect condition and used for transporting her most important guests to their deaths. The screenplay uses the Statesman agency to critique American gun culture, as Tequila carries multiple firearms at all times, while Harry prefers a single umbrella that serves both defensive and offensive purposes. Harry's amnesia manifests as a complete inability to perform basic spycraft, such as recognizing a concealed weapon or identifying a tail, forcing Eggsy to protect his former protector. Ginger Ale's technical expertise includes the ability to predict enemy movements through data analysis, a skill she uses to guide Eggsy through Poppy's base without triggering any alarms. The mechanical lasso's battery life becomes a plot point during the climax, as Whiskey's weapon runs out of power mid-fight, forcing him to rely on conventional combat techniques instead. Poppy's decision to build her base in Cambodia includes the detail that she personally selected the location for its proximity to drug production facilities, reducing transportation costs for her global operations. Elton John's cameo includes a scene where he refuses to perform Crocodile Rock because the song reminds him of a bad tour experience, a detail that adds authenticity to his reluctant prisoner characterization. The film's treatment of drug addiction includes a scene where a wealthy businessman contracts the toxin through recreational cocaine use, showing that addiction affects all social classes equally. Merlin's decision to sacrifice himself comes after he calculates that the landmine field contains exactly 17 explosive devices, and the team has only 15 minutes before Poppy activates the global toxin. Poppy's robot dogs were programmed with learning algorithms that allow them to adapt to their opponents' fighting styles, making them increasingly dangerous as battles progress. Eggsy's loyalty to Harry extends to refusing a direct order from the British Prime Minister, showing that his personal relationships matter more than his national loyalty. The film's production design for Poppy's Land includes a fully functional movie theater that screens only 1950s films, creating a self-contained cultural bubble for her brainwashed employees. Harry's restored memories return through physical triggers, with the weight of his Kingsman signet ring reminding him of his oath to protect Britain at any cost. The screenplay's dialogue for Poppy includes several references to real female criminals, including Griselda Blanco and Myra Hindley, positioning her within a historical tradition of female violence. The film's action choreography for the chocolate factory fight required Pedro Pascal to perform while covered in sticky brown liquid, with multiple takes needed because the chocolate dried and cracked between shooting sessions. Statesman's medical technology includes a neural imaging system that displays Harry's memories as visual projections, allowing Eggsy to see exactly what his mentor has forgotten. Poppy's Diner includes a working jukebox that plays only songs about drugs, such as Golden Brown and Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, a detail that reinforces her cartel queen persona. Eggsy's relationship with Tilda includes a scene where she uses her royal connections to track Poppy's financial transactions, proving that princesses can be valuable assets in spy missions. The film's budget allowed for the construction of a full-scale replica of a Cambodian jungle temple, which serves as the exterior entrance to Poppy's underground base. Whiskey's betrayal becomes more complex when the film reveals he has been feeding information to Poppy for years, making him a long-term mole rather than a recent convert to her cause. The film's sound team recorded actual chocolate factory machinery for the climax, including the rumble of mixers and the hiss of tempering machines, adding industrial authenticity to the fight. Merlin's choice of country roads carries additional meaning because the song was written by John Denver, a musician known for his environmental activism, which contrasts with Poppy's destructive drug empire. Poppy's robot dogs each have names that reference real ABBA members, continuing the film's pattern of pop culture references embedded in weapon systems. The film's visual palette during the cable car fight uses cold blues and whites to emphasize the alpine setting, while the chocolate factory scene uses warm browns and golds for maximum visual contrast. Ginger Ale's promotion to field agent includes a scene where she receives combat training from Tequila, who is finally thawed from his cryogenic prison in the film's final act. The film's mid-credits scene showing Harry's return to duty includes a visual callback to the first film's church scene, as Harry enters a room filled with enemies and calmly adjusts his cufflinks. Poppy's decision to broadcast her demands via vintage television includes a scene where she practices her on-camera smile in a mirror, showing her perfectionism and vanity. Eggsy's final fight with Whiskey requires him to use the chocolate vat as a weapon, splashing hot fudge into his opponent's eyes to create an opening for a killing blow. The film's screenplay originally included a scene where Harry meets Elton John in captivity, but the meeting was cut to maintain the pacing of the Cambodian base assault sequence. Harry's mechanical eye includes a recording function that captures everything he sees, creating a permanent visual diary that he reviews each morning to reinforce his recovered memories. The film's marketing campaign included a tie-in with a major bourbon brand that produced a limited edition Statesman whiskey, which reviewers noted was surprisingly drinkable for movie merchandise. Poppy's character receives a brief moment of triumph when she believes she has defeated Kingsman, only to have her victory stolen by Ginger Ale's remote hacking of her systems. The film's editing team used match cuts between Poppy's smile and her robot dog's mechanical grins, emphasizing her inhumanity through visual comparison to her creations. Statesman's agent naming convention extends to their weapons, with tequila carrying a revolver named the Shooter and whiskey using a shotgun called the Chaser. Poppy's decision to imprison Elton John includes a scene where she forces him to watch his own biopic Rocketman, a meta-joke about celebrity narcissism within a film about a narcissistic villain. The film's climactic firefight includes a moment where Elton John uses his piano bench as a shield, deflecting bullets while continuing to play the song's bridge section without missing a note. Harry's umbrella returns with a new feature that deploys a grappling hook, allowing him to scale Poppy's diner walls during the final assault on her stronghold. The film's box office performance of $410 million ensured that the franchise would continue, but the mixed critical reception led Vaughn to reconsider his approach to the third film's tone. Ginger Ale's recruitment backstory includes a detail about her being recruited from the National Security Agency after exposing a domestic spying program, making her a whistleblower whose skills were too valuable to waste in prison. Poppy's land was designed with multiple redundant security systems, including fingerprint scanners and retinal readers, ensuring that only authorized personnel could access her private quarters. Eggsy's proposal to Tilda uses a ring that doubles as a GPS tracker, allowing Kingsman to locate him even if he is captured and stripped of his other gadgets. The film's visual effects team for Poppy's toxin effects studied real videos of drug overdoses, ensuring that the actors' performances accurately reflected the physical toll of poisoning. Whiskey's death by chocolate vat was originally scripted as a death by molten lead, but Vaughn changed it to chocolate after visiting a candy factory and being inspired by the visual possibilities. Poppy's final expression of fear comes when she realizes her husband has been working with Kingsman, a betrayal that hurts more than any bullet or blade could have. The film's screenplay uses the character of Champagne to deliver a monologue about the importance of partnership, noting that neither Kingsman nor Statesman could have defeated Poppy alone. Elton John's line about not being a hero, just a musician with good timing, serves as both comedy and a humble acknowledgement that his combat skills are accidental rather than trained. The film's post-credits scene showing a Statesman recruitment drive in London includes a brief appearance by a character wearing lederhosen, teasing a German intelligence agency for potential future installments. Harry's final line of the film, delivered while sharing a whiskey with Champagne, reminds audiences that the best partnerships are aged like fine bourbon, improving slowly over years of shared experience. The film's runtime of 141 minutes includes approximately 5 minutes of black screen before the mid-credits scene, giving audiences time to process Merlin's death before returning to lighter material. The film's narrative structure deliberately denies audiences the satisfaction of a traditional villain defeat, as Poppy is not killed by a hero, but by her own toxin administered through her own golden pin, creating poetic justice without hero bloodshed. Poppy's 1950s aesthetic extends to her choice of torture methods, which include electric shock therapy and sensory deprivation, techniques that were actually used in psychiatric hospitals during that decade. The screenplay uses the Kingsman-Statesman alliance to explore how different cultures define masculinity, with British restraint contrasting against American swagger, while both prove equally effective in combat situations. Harry's journey from amnesiac to operative mirrors Eggsy's journey from trainee to knight in the first film, creating a parallel structure that rewards audiences who remember the original's beats. Ginger Ale's technical expertise includes the ability to create false identities for the entire Kingsman team within hours, a skill she demonstrates by fabricating diplomatic credentials for their Cambodian infiltration. The mechanical lasso's origin story reveals it was developed by NASA for cutting space debris, repurposed by Statesman after the space agency deemed it too dangerous for orbital use. Poppy's decision to build her base in Cambodia includes the detail that she personally murdered the previous landowner, a Cambodian general who refused to sell his property to a foreign criminal. Elton John's cameo includes a scene where he performs Tiny Dancer as a distraction while Eggsy sneaks through Poppy's kitchen, using the song's length to time his silent infiltration. The film's treatment of drug addiction includes a scene where a teenage user contracts the toxin at her first party, showing how a single poor decision can lead to fatal consequences. Merlin's decision to sacrifice himself comes after he calculates that the team's escape route contains exactly 6 landmines, and he is the only one who knows the safe path through the field. Poppy's robot dogs were constructed using the same animatronic technology that created the dinosaurs in Jurassic World, giving them realistic movement patterns despite their mechanical appearance. Eggsy's loyalty to Harry extends to refusing a direct order from the United Nations Security Council, showing that his personal code of honor transcends international diplomatic pressure. The film's production design for Poppy's Land includes a fully functional recording studio where Elton John is forced to record covers of his own songs, a humiliation that motivates his eventual escape attempt. Harry's restored memories return through olfactory triggers, with the smell of Kingsman cologne reminding him of his first day at the agency when he was just 18 years old. The screenplay's dialogue for Whiskey includes several references to his Texas childhood, including memories of his father's ranch and his mother's pecan pie, humanizing him before his betrayal. The film's action choreography for the chocolate factory fight required Taron Egerton to perform while slipping on chocolate-covered floors, with safety mats hidden beneath the liquid for protection during falls. Statesman's medical technology includes a genetic database that identifies potential recruits based on their DNA, explaining how they found Harry after his apparent death in London. Poppy's Diner includes a working photo booth that prints vintage-style black and white photos, which she uses to document her victims' final moments before their deaths. Eggsy's relationship with Tilda includes a scene where she uses her diplomatic immunity to transport Kingsman equipment across international borders, proving that royal status has practical espionage applications. The film's budget allowed for the construction of a full-scale replica of a Kentucky bourbon warehouse, complete with thousands of aging barrels that were later auctioned to collectors. Whiskey's betrayal becomes more tragic when the film reveals he was once considered for the position of Galahad, the role Harry eventually received, creating a professional jealousy that festered for decades. The film's sound team recorded actual chocolate tempering machines for the climax, including the rhythmic clanking of conching equipment that adds musical texture to the fight scenes. Merlin's choice of Country Roads carries additional meaning because the song is frequently played at funerals in West Virginia, making it an appropriate anthem for his dying moments in Statesman territory. Poppy's robot dogs each have kill counters displayed on their chest plates, a detail that reveals they have murdered dozens of people before encountering the Kingsman team. The film's visual palette during Harry's memory recovery uses split-screen techniques to show his past and present simultaneously, emphasizing the gap between who he was and who he has become. Ginger Ale's promotion to field agent includes a scene where she receives her own Statesman badge, a golden circle pin identical to Poppy's, but with a Kingsman crest on the reverse side. The film's mid-credits scene showing Harry's return to duty includes a visual callback to the first film's pub fight, as Harry demolishes a group of thugs while protecting a young recruit. Poppy's decision to broadcast her demands via vintage television includes a scene where she applies her lipstick before going on air, a feminine ritual that contrasts with the violence of her ultimatum. Eggsy's final fight with Whiskey requires him to use the chocolate vat as a hiding place, submerging himself in hot fudge to ambush his opponent from below the surface. The film's screenplay originally included a scene where Ginger Ale meets Merlin's holographic recording after his death, but the scene was cut to avoid undermining the emotional impact of his sacrifice. Harry's mechanical eye includes a zoom function that allows him to read micro-expressions, a capability he uses to detect Whiskey's lies during their final confrontation in the chocolate factory. The film's marketing campaign included a tie-in with a major eyewear brand that produced replica Kingsman glasses, complete with functioning cameras that could record video to smartphones. Poppy's character receives a brief moment of reflection when she looks at old photographs of her childhood, revealing that her obsession with the 1950s stems from a happy childhood in that era. The film's editing team used jump cuts during the cable car fight to create a sense of vertigo, simulating the disorientation of fighting hundreds of feet above the ground. Statesman's agent naming convention extends to their coffee mugs, which are labeled with each agent's codename in gold lettering, a detail that reinforces their branding obsession. Poppy's decision to imprison Elton John includes a scene where she makes him watch her execute a henchman, using psychological torture to break his spirit before his scheduled performance. The film's climactic firefight includes a moment where Elton John uses his signature heart-shaped glasses as a weapon, throwing them into an enemy's face with surprising accuracy for a musician. Harry's umbrella returns with a new feature that deploys a listening device disguised as its handle, allowing him to eavesdrop on conversations without entering dangerous rooms. The film's box office performance of $410 million ensured that the franchise would continue, but the mixed critical reception led to a 3-year gap before the third film entered production. Ginger Ale's recruitment backstory includes a detail about her being rejected from field agent training due to her small stature, making her promotion a victory over institutional prejudice within the intelligence community. Poppy's land was designed with multiple redundant escape routes, including a secret tunnel that leads to a river where a speedboat waits for her emergency evacuation. Eggsy's proposal to Tilda uses a ring that doubles as a recording device, allowing him to capture her acceptance speech for posterity while also serving as a potential surveillance tool. The film's visual effects team for Poppy's toxin effects studied real videos of Parkinson's disease patients, ensuring that the actors' performances accurately reflected the tremor progression of neurological damage. Whiskey's death by chocolate vat was originally scripted as a death by molten caramel, but Vaughn changed it to chocolate after deciding that caramel's golden color would be too similar to Poppy's branding. Poppy's final expression of despair comes when she realizes her golden circle, the symbol of her power, has been completely destroyed by the Kingsman assault on her headquarters. The film's screenplay uses the character of Champagne to deliver a monologue about the importance of legacy, noting that both Kingsman and Statesman will outlive their current agents and continue protecting the world. Elton John's line about finally understanding why people like action movies serves as both comedy and a meta-commentary on his own transformation from musician to action hero. The film's post-credits scene showing a Statesman recruitment drive in London includes a brief appearance by a character wearing a kimono, teasing a Japanese intelligence agency for potential future installments. Harry's final line of the film, delivered while walking through the reconstructed Kingsman headquarters, reminds audiences that every ending is just a new beginning dressed in different clothing. The film's runtime of 141 minutes includes approximately 3 minutes of black screen before the post-credits scene, allowing audiences to catch their breath before the franchise's future is teased.